He made a woman pay for her husband's mistake. The man was his enemy. The punishment was not for the man alone, it was for his wife too. Vlad ordered his men to take her. They forced her to watch as they did their terrible work. Her crime was simple. She was married to a man who defied the prince. Her fate was meant as a message to all who might cross him. It was a story told in whispers, a warning written in blood and in tears, a dark tale from a violent time, just one of many, about Vlad the Third, Prince of Wallachia. We know him as Vlad the Impaler. His name makes us think of vampires and darkness. Vlad III was a real person, not a creature of the night. He was born around the year 1431, a prince of Wallachia, land that lies in modern-day Romania, caught between two great powers. To the west stood Hungary, to the east the mighty Ottomans. His father, Vlad II, Dracul, the dragon, belonged to the Order of the Dragon. Vlad's childhood was dangerous and full of betrayal. He and his brother Radu were sent as political hostages to the Ottoman court. He learned their language, their ways of war, their methods of power. It made him hard and suspicious of everyone. He ruled Wallachia 3 times, in short, violent reigns. To survive, he had to be strong. He had to be feared. One of the most infamous tales of Vlad's cruelty is rooted in his own capital, Târgoviște. Here, in the heart of Wallachia, the boyar nobility held immense power. They were the kingmakers and the kingbreakers, a treacherous class of aristocrats who had long played the great powers of Hungary and the Ottoman Empire against each other for their own gain. Vlad knew that to truly rule, he first had to break them. His moment came during the holiest of celebrations, Easter Sunday. He invited hundreds of boyars and their families to a grand feast, a supposed gesture of reconciliation. He blamed this very class for the brutal murder of his father and older brother, Mircea, who was buried alive. As the wine flowed, Vlad posed a chilling question. How many princes had they seen rule in their lifetimes? Some, puffed with pride and wine, boasted of serving dozens of princes. With every boast, they were signing their own death warrants, admitting to a legacy of conspiracy and disloyalty that had kept Wallachia weak and unstable. They had confessed their guilt without even realizing it. The feast turned to terror. On Vlad's signal, his soldiers seized them all. The elder boyars, the ones who had boasted so proudly, were marched outside the city walls. There, a forest of sharpened stakes awaited them. They were impaled and left to die in agony, a gruesome spectacle for all to see. But the punishment wasn't over. The younger, healthier nobles and their families were spared the stake for a different fate. They were forced on a brutal death march, over 50 miles to the ruins of Panari Castle. Their task was to rebuild the fortress with their bare hands. Legend says they worked until the clothes rotted from their bodies, and they dropped from exhaustion. They were transforming a ruin into Vlad's personal eagle's nest, a fortress built on suffering that would later incorrectly become entangled with the myth of Castle Dracula. The story of the Easter feast became a cornerstone of his terrifying reputation. It was a message of absolute power, and it spread like wildfire, carried across Europe in German pamphlets that depicted him as a monstrous tyrant. These pamphlets, or Dracula tracts, were filled with sensationalized atrocities. One tale claims Vlad forced a defeated commander's wife to watch her husband's impalement before subjecting her to horrors the text hints are too grim to even name. Whether every lurid detail is true is still debated by historians. But the method behind the madness was brutally clear. This was psychological warfare. To break his enemies, Vlad didn't just strike at them, he annihilated their families, their legacy, and their honor, ensuring no one would ever dare to cross him again. Of all the legends surrounding Vlad the Impaler, one image is so profoundly disturbing it has echoed through centuries. A feast set within a forest of the dead. This grotesque scene doesn't come from a single questionable source. It appears with chilling consistency across hostile German pamphlets from Nuremberg and Strasbourg, and even in later Russian chronicles. Each account, though biased, paints a similar picture of calculated horror, designed to demonize Vlad in the eyes of Western Europe. The year was 1462. Sultan Mehmed II, the conqueror of Constantinople, marched on Wallachia with an army that vastly outnumbered Vlad's forces. Outmatched by conventional means, Vlad resorted to a desperate and brutal campaign of guerrilla warfare, poisoning wells and launching daring night raids. But his masterpiece of psychological warfare was yet to come. On the road to his capital, Târgoviște, Vlad created a spectacle. After a major battle, he had thousands of captured or dead Ottoman soldiers impaled. This was no chaotic massacre. The bodies were arranged with a grim, terrifying geometry, a forest of stakes stretching for miles. In the center, a taller stake was reserved for the defeated Ottoman commander, a mark of his lost authority. And here, the story takes its most macabre turn. Amid the groans of the dying and the suffocating stench of death, Vlad and his most loyal boyars supposedly set a table and feasted. One legend claims a soldier, unable to bear the smell, held his nose. Vlad, noticing his discomfort, had him impaled on a stake taller than the rest, remarking coldly, "Up there, the air will be fresher for you." Whether this specific conversation happened is debatable, a detail likely embellished by his enemies to underscore his inhumanity. But the core act, the feast itself, served as a chilling performance of absolute power. It was a declaration that he was not merely a warrior, but the master of death itself, so comfortable with carnage that he could dine within a nightmare of his own making. When Sultan Mehmed II and his vanguard finally arrived, the sight broke them. Even the conqueror of empires, a man accustomed to the brutalities of war, was reportedly shaken, turning his horse around in disgust. The psychological blow was immense. Ottoman morale shattered. Terror had become Vlad's most effective soldier. In this one act, Vlad turned his enemies' bodies into a weapon, a gruesome broadcast to the world. It was a final, terrible insult that said more than any sword could. To challenge him was to become a prop in his theater of horror. Why was Vlad so cruel? We must look at his world, not random madness, calculated moves in a deadly game. Powerful boyars killed his father and brother. He believed he had to shatter their power or be destroyed. Brutal punishments were political control. Examples no one would dare to test. The Ottomans loomed. He lacked numbers and gold, so he used ambush and fear. Impalement demoralized enemies, a way for a small realm to face a giant. His justice was absolute. A golden cup left in public was never stolen. People feared the price. Order without crime, paid for with fear. He believed only absolute fear could forge absolute law. Hostage years, foreign power, family betrayal. He learned that mercy was peril. He chose survival through ruthless terror. To understand the monster, we must first understand the storytellers. Much of what the Western world first knew of Vlad Dracula didn't come from Romanian chronicles or Ottoman reports. Instead, his image was forged in the heart of Germany, thanks to the recent invention of the printing press. These German pamphlets were a new form of media, a kind of early mass propaganda that could spread a story with unprecedented speed. They were designed to shock and sell, bearing sensational titles like The Terrifying and Wondrously True Story of a Wicked Tyrant Called Dracula. They were filled with dramatic, often gruesome woodcut images. These pamphlets became instant bestsellers, spreading his dark fame from Nuremberg to Lübeck and across the trade routes of Europe. But these were not neutral histories. They were weapons in an economic war. Vlad's efforts to build Wallachia's own merchant class and control trade routes directly threatened the centuries-old privileges of the Transylvanian Saxon merchants. When he punished them for defying his trade laws, they sought revenge not on the battlefield, but in print. The stories they printed were a meticulous catalog of horrors. They listed atrocities one by one, some plausible, many grotesque and fantastical. Tales of boiling victims, forcing mothers to eat their own children, and dining amidst a forest of the impaled, were crafted to paint him not as a rival ruler, but as an inhuman monster, an enemy of all Christendom. Yet, the most effective propaganda is woven with threads of truth. The pamphlets twisted real facts. Vlad did use impalement as a tool of war and terror, a practice he likely learned from the Ottomans. He did fiercely fight the Saxon merchants over economic control, and he did rule his own land with a famously harsh iron fist. The German stories are powerful evidence, not of the exact deeds of the man, but of how reputations are built and how history is so often written by enemies with the means to be heard. From town to town, his image grew, part truth, part terror, part commerce, until Vlad the Man blurred into Vlad the Myth, a narrative that has haunted him for over 500 years. Separating Vlad from Dracula is hard. 5 centuries of myth tangled with history. German prints demonized him. Russian tales cast him as a fierce but just ruler. Ottoman sources called him treacherous and cruel. There is no unbiased witness. We compare accounts and seek common threads. Modern scholars, Radu Florescu and Raymond McNally, peeled back layers of legend. They traveled, studied documents, used archaeology, finding that Vlad's ruthless terror was real, even if extremes were embellished. The most shocking stories, like what he did to enemies' wives, are strongest in German sources. He likely held and used families as pawns, humiliating and enslaving them, to destroy an enemy's will and future. Between brutal tactic and pure evil legend lies a thin line, where fact ends and propaganda begins. Vlad's impact was immediate and powerful. To enemies, the Ottomans and Saxon merchants, he was a devil. To many Wallachians, a hero who brought order. Two memories grew side by side, tyrant and savior. Then Bram Stoker bound Vlad's name to a vampire, creating the most famous monster in the world. History, folklore, and fiction fused. Dracula overshadowed the Prince of Wallachia. Today, Vlad is three at once: brutal ruler, Romanian symbol of resistance, and immortal vampire. The real man is nearly hidden beneath the cloak of his fictional counterpart. His shadow is long and complex, shaped by terror, ink, and imagination. We end where we began, with a ghost from the past, a woman made to watch an unspeakable horror, a ruler feasting among the dead, a forest of stakes, silent against the sky. For 500 years, these images have not lost their power to shock. They show what happens when power is absolute, and fear is the tool of government. He turned bodies into statements, suffering into messages for empires. By attacking families, especially wives, he made vengeance personal and total, striking at an enemy's future. Today the name means vampire. The man is lost in fiction. So we ask, when we remember terrible deeds, do we recall the person, or the monster our stories created?